I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mrs. Walker, would you lead us in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the record in Town News and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Darian, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through the comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
On the roll, Mrs. Acosta will not be here tonight. Mr. Del Greco.
Here.
Mrs. Downey.
Here.
Mrs. Norian.
Here.
Mr. Nutley.
Here.
Mrs. Walker.
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
Mr. Darian.
Here.
Mrs. Nichols.
Here. Open to the public for agenda items only.
Hi, Jen Allen. I was just hoping to hear from the board for D2 what the school security improvements were, and if it was $45,000 or $450,000 of the withdrawal.
Yes, thank you. It's 45,000. It's 45,000, and it's for cameras. Good catch. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, moving forward, in your packet, it didn't make it on Friday because it's new. In your packet at the table, there is another confidential. It's an HIB. We are just voting to accept it tonight. Next meeting will be affirming, but that's what that is. And the other two, if you see under A, are affirming. So you're just voting to accept the site. There was no time to get it out on Friday. With that, we'll move to superintendent's report.
I have just two announcements for my superintendent report today. As many of you know, Monday was our on-site CUSAC review. 4 representatives from the county were here. They were here from 8:40 in the morning till 2:40, and they don't take lunch. They just work straight through the entire time. We will not get our results until August, and we still have one more additional visit from them, which will be finance. They were very complimentary about our curriculum, our test scores. Actually, they kept talking about, they had a lot of questions about science, because we look at our science test scores and we think that they are the weakest area for us, but it turns out that we are the highest in the group of 25 districts being evaluated this year, so they had a lot of questions about what specifically are we doing in that area. We have a few more documents to send. They will still do a fiscal review visit, and then we will have our scores. The next step is they send our scores to the state, and then the state will certify the scores. And the final announcement for tonight is congratulations to our Odyssey of the Mind teams. Both teams placed first at the regional tournament and qualified them for the state finals. Thank you to Mr. Walsh for judging on behalf of Oradell Public School. And the other excitement about Odyssey of the Mind is that there were 4 teams from River Edge there and 1 team from Riverdell also. The Riverdell team also won their division and qualified for the state tournament. And 2 teams from River Edge will also be going to the state tournament, which will be held at Carteret Junior High School. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Iapelli?
Yes, I will now present the tentative 24-25 budget. And I stress tentative The state doesn't give us our state aid figure until February 29th. That came during the day, so it's a very short turnaround time. So I stress that it's tentative, that there still may be changes to this budget. So just to go over, what do we do? Budget process, revenues, review the appropriations, tentative budget, submit that to the county, and then we'll talk about the next steps. The budget process, I don't think it starts any one given day, because I see it as it's an ongoing. It starts from, it's always a process. You're always trying to look for where are you now, where are you going. I try at least not to focus just on right here, this year or this month, to try to look at it a little more at a holistically and going forward. But it involves, everyone, teachers, principals, supervisors, superintendent, B&G, myself, and of course the finance committee. And the budget must be balanced. Revenues and appropriations have to equal, can't have a deficit. Tentative budget is the first one you approve. It goes to the county, and the county can have that. It's on or before March 20th, we will submit it. And they have, as long as they take to review it. Then we'll have, after that, we could advertise, final budget process, final budget presentation, I apologize. So our revenues are pretty limited in where they come from. I mean, we'll see as the percentages, but tax levy, state aid, which we only received on 2/9, and other sources would be some federal funds that we also receive. We look at salaries and benefits, you'll see that's overwhelming share of the budget. We try to look at what's the enrollment next year, what costs are rising, and we try to get as many quotes from vendors that we are currently using for next year. And the balance piece, working with the finance committee, working with Ms. Bozius on trying to figure out how to allocate these resources in the best way possible. So you can see 84% of our budget is financed by the local taxpayers. We do have some miscellaneous revenue that could be from the YWCA. We have All the World's a Stage. You have some various groups that use it, and you charge fees. State aid this year went up 8.5%. So we had about 957,000 last year. It went to 1,038,000, just rounding. Next piece, so we just broke it out. Local sources, state sources, and then here is, again, these are from our reserves, but if you think about it, it's still from local sources, in a way. So we're using our budgeted fund balance that comes right from the June 30th audit. We are using the capital reserve to fund the local share of the ROD grant. And I will talk more about that as we go on. And the capital reserve withdrawal will also be for other capital projects. Those are projects not included in the ROD grant. Maintenance reserve withdrawal for ongoing maintenance, and the emergency reserve withdrawal of $45,000 will be used to fund the security improvements. And it was $45,000. I noticed that typo. Thank you. So that's where our budget is right now. Operating budget is $15,856,743. So our appropriations, as you can see, 71% salaries and benefits of our budget. Special ed tuitions, transportation, 8%. Capital projects, 7%. All the supplies and materials that are used in this facility, only 3% of the budget. Purchase professional services, this is anyone with, say, a certificate or a license. It could be your auditors, your architects, your behaviorists, OTs, PTs, anyone that we contract out. And other purchase services would be non-certs. So, for instance, you have HVAC repair, you have plumbing repair. That's where that falls under. funding. So we have the $522,000 that we will be putting in. The state is coming up. That's 60% of that project's total cost. And the state will be funding 40%, so $348,208. It is highly unlikely that project is done this summer, probably not just because of their HVAC Oradell units, and these things are back ordered. There's all kinds of supply chain issues, so that's not going to be done. Again, we're going to use withdrawal from the reserve accounts, and there's no additional impact on taxes. Renovate the stairwells. There was a project done this past year that went well, so looking to continue moving on with that. There is a rooftop unit above the kindergarten room that is starting to fail. That needs to be replaced. We're hoping that that will get done at some point next year. The summer is not going to be possible because, again, it's a rooftop HVAC unit, back ordered. So we're looking at, it's only a 2-day job, 3-day job, so we get a break or a weekend they could do it. And then it's the school security improvements, the additional cameras that are going to be added. So this is the resolution. It's our general fund. Special revenue fund, this is additional aid received either from the state. Most of that is IDEA, a special ed formula grant. There's our debt service fund, that's down. This is the last year, the debt service. This is the last payment. So next year that will not be part of the budget, and it's down from last year. So this is the final payment this school year. So the total levy is going to be $13,772,727 as of now with a tentative budget. The debt service number never changes because that's already been approved, so that will always be that number. But there could be a change to the general fund number, which is your local tax levy, that $13,343,253. $253, that's the tax levy as it stands today. So we adopt, I'll submit on or before March 20th. We can't advertise until the county approves it. So they have, the public hearing could be April 24th to May 7th. You have to give at minimum of 4 days notice to have the public hearing. So it has to be posted at least 4 days before you have it. And then the budget can still be changed even there. So the budget can be worked on and refined until the last meeting that you adopted at. So if you have any questions, comments, this is really, this one I look as more of an overview, this tentative budget.
Can you just tell the board tentatively, we're going at what, 2.79%?
2.79, and effective rate actually goes down because of the debt service is down, so its effective rate is going to be about 2.75 as of now.
As of now.
And last year, it was a 2.79 levy increase. And right now, we're doing the budget at the same levy increase, but the effective rate will go down because debt service has gone down slightly.
I think you said this, but purchase professional services and other purchase service, one is on the building?
It's all like certificated. So if we think about it, the purchase professional are OTs, PTs,
Attorney,
behaviorists,
auditor.
attorney, auditor. And then the other would be anyone who's not in that category.
Mr. Walsh?
Can you tell us what the state aid was?
The state aid, well, last year was $957,000, and it went to $1,038,000. So roughly 8.5% increase.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Peter, the 8% special ed tuitions and transportation, is that number high or low compared to years past?
No, that's pretty much where it's been. I mean, it depends on any given year. I've looked, student could move in tomorrow, 2 students could move in, and that's 2 more tuitions. So it's really, you can't predict it. You try to anticipate, but to say, you know, right now we have X students, to say we're going to have, hopefully we have a great idea of what we're going to have going forward, but students move in,
Right.
district's responsible, so.
Yep. Thank you.
And the busing part, the transportation has been wildly high these last few years. Routes are incredibly expensive, but Region 5 is working on bringing those routes down, putting more children that are going to the same location on a bus, so you could defer the costs amongst 3 students as opposed to just 1 student. So it's something that's being worked on, but it's hard to combat because there really aren't that many busing companies that are, you know, transporting these students.
Mrs. Walker?
The purchase professional service. You did say the attorney was mixed in with that, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else to your report?
No, we had our bid walkthrough for the projects that we are going to complete this year. There's the resolution on there to do a capital reserve withdrawal. We had 6 contractors show up for the walkthrough for the roof replacement projects. And 4 of them, after talking to Land Associates, our architects, 4 of them are going to bid. The mechanical, which is the exhaust fans, no one showed up, but that wasn't unusual. However, only one person as of now, one company as of now, has picked up and is bidding. So we will know definitively on March 27th, because that's when the bids are due to be opened. And if you have any additional questions regarding the tentative budget, anything in the budget, please feel free to reach out and ask me.
Thank you. Moving to minutes, we have review of February 28th. Any questions or comments, please email Mr. Iapelli. We have the approval of February 7th. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of February 7th.
Second by Mrs. Walker. Any questions? Call the question.
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Abstain.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes,
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Committee reports. Mr. Darian, would you take administrative?
Yes. We have administrative items A1 through A4 that I'd like to introduce.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Mr. Darian?
Yeah, I'm having some problems, or I have an issue with A3. And that's because this incident occurred off school grounds. It occurred after school, and it was not within a school function. So this really, you know, time and place, I think we don't have proper jurisdiction over this. I know the law may say otherwise, but I just don't agree with that. And so I'm having trouble. And if you can, isolate A3 from A1 through A4, consent, or I'll just vote on it separately.
You can, yeah, we can say yes and no to, yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Call the question?
So we will do, on the roll, we will go A1, A2, and A4. And then
You
we
can
can do
just do them all, and
A3.
he'll
Do them
say-
all?
yeah,
Okay.
and he'll just swear
A1
yes.
through A4, on the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
So A1, 2, and 4, yes, 3, no.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
yes,
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
For A1, A2, and A4, yes, and for A3, no.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Buildings and grounds, Mr. Darian.
Yes, we have just B1 for tonight, so I'd like to introduce B1 for facility use.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Curriculum, Mrs. Norian.
Yes, we actually did have a meeting tonight, so we will have the minutes in our next packet. But it just kind of updated us on where we are and how we're going to move forward. With that, I would like to move C1 and C2.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Finance, Mr. Darian, would you take that?
Yes, for finance, I'd like to introduce items D1 through D4.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Mr. Darian?
Yes, and of course, I can't find my notes because it's on the wrong agenda. So I just wanted to comment regarding the resolutions tonight for these capital improvement projects. I'm going to run off the top of my head. We're basically funding $1 million out of our regular budget to maintain the school that was built in 1928, that currently is in good condition, and under our governance and our stewardship, we are continuously maintaining the school at no cost in terms of additional referendums to the taxpayer. And I just want to toot our own horn for a second on that, because it takes a lot of work, and I just want it to be part of the record. So that's all I have to say.
Any other questions or comments? Call the question?
Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Norian.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I wish I had a better report, but there was a meeting scheduled for the 9th of March, which I attended. But I was the only one in New Jersey to attend that meeting. Somehow they canceled it. Now, it might have been because my phone number was changed and they couldn't contact me. I want to think that's what happened. But I got there at 8 o'clock, stayed till 9 o'clock, and drove home. But I think they don't usually, when they have a new director in the legislative committee, they don't usually hold off meetings for months. So there might be a meeting this weekend or next weekend in between the board meetings. So I will attend it again, but I'm sorry, I went down and
Where
guess
was
they-
it? Where'd you go?
Trenton.
Oh, my gosh. Mr. Iapelli, can you find out for Mr. Walsh when the
Yes.
delegate meeting is? And can you please make sure his phone
Reimbursed
number,
for travel.
his phone number is
His cell
updated
phone.
with them?
Yep.
But can you find out when it is for him?
I will.
Do we need to reapprove travel expenses in case, or could we retro them?
We can retro 'em.
Okay,
It's okay.
okay,
I'll call you tomorrow,
yeah.
Pete, all right?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Personnel, Mrs. Walker.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to introduce F1.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions? I'll ask my normal. Was the leave put through our attorney?
The leave was put through the attorney.
I have to check every time. Any other questions? Call the question?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey.
Yes.
Mrs. Noreen.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes. Policy, Mr. Del Greco?
I'd like to report policy did have a meeting, and I'd like to introduce G1, first reading for 3 policies.
So if anyone has any questions or comments on these policies, we'll be voting on them next meeting, so please email Mr. Del Greco, myself.
Will we get a copy?
It
It's
should be in your
Yeah.
packet.
it's in your packet. So if you have any questions, email Mr. Del Greco, myself, and the superintendent. Public relations, Mrs. Downey.
I have nothing to report.
We need a meeting, I think, for the
Was it in the
newsletter.
envelope?
Maybe we could set that up. Okay, this time open to the public. Not seeing any. Anyone have any old or new business on the board?
Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Walker?
Just to say congratulations to the Odyssey of the Mind again this year. Every year, they seem to be so strong in their whole year through, and to be this far gone now as far as being accomplished, it's credit to all the dedication of the students, parents, and especially Ms. Shawn. Keep up the good work for the finals.
Mr. Del Greco?
Just more of a comment, just like to thank the school district on including parents having STEAM days, today finding leprechauns and all the other great things to include parents, and I think that's a wonderful thing, and thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we do need to go into a closed session for student issues, so Mr. Darian, would you mind making that motion?
Of course. I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive closed session for student issues.
I'll second. I'll third it.
Second by Mrs. Noreen. Roll call?
On the roll, Mr. Del Greco.
Yes.
Mrs. Downey. Mrs. Noreen.
Yes.
Mr. Nutlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Walker. Mr. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes.
Mrs. Nichols.
Yes, we will not be taking action when we return. We will not be returning or taking action.